creative powers to speak our planet into existence and to fill it with animals and plants and rivers and rocks and streams. But he was different from them. He did not use his power because he was forced to do so, or because he lacked anything in himself, but simply because he wanted to create beauty and share it with others. In his crowning achievement, Great One made man and woman, limited in power and knowledge, but astonishing in beauty and creativity. They were like Great One, but they were no match for him. Great One named them, gave them a home, and visited them each evening to converse with them and enjoy their pleasure as they named and interacted with his creation. Great One created man and woman to share with him in friendship and in community, and to be partners with him in loving and caring for his creation. But a great rebellion started in Great One's home. Unfathomably beautiful creatures made by Great One decided to attempt to overthrow him. Their rebellion failed, and a third were driven away from Great One's presence. One of them visited man and woman. He deceived them, and they too joined the rebellion. When Great One came for his evening visit with man and woman, they were missing. He could not find them. The loneliness was tangible, and the sadness hung in the air. "Where are you?" he shouted tearfully. "I miss you. Why have you left me?" Man and woman were hiding. When Great One found them, their faces were covered with shame, and their bodies were draped with strange garments. Man and woman had always been so at ease in the presence of Great One, but now they were ashamed. This was a shattering consequence of their rebellion. Great One sent man and woman from their home, pronounced judgment on them for their betrayal. They had joined the rebellion and broken friendship and trust with Great One. And their separation from Great One was a living death to them. Their death infected their descendants and all of creation like a strange and alien virus. But the next episode in the story is about sacrifice, which is when someone gives up something of great value for someone else. Great One longed for man and woman to return, but they persisted in their rebellion, followed by their offspring. Anger and violence filled Great One's creation, and Great One sent messengers, entreating everyone to turn away from the rebellion. But they rejected the messengers. Finally, Great One chose to visit man and woman once again. Perhaps if he came to them in person, they would listen. They would change their minds. They would resign from their foolish ways and return to their Creator. Great One had conceived a plan long before. It was his greatest and final effort to win back man and woman, and he was now ready to carry it out. He used his creative powers to become like man, like woman, to come close to them in kindness and in strong weakness, to speak to them so that they could finally understand. Surely, Great One reasoned, if he became like man, like woman, they would finally listen. Great One longed to say that he missed them and that he yearned for them to return to him, but he would not be true to himself if he ignored their rebellion and accepted them back without their remorse. To his great sadness, man and woman turned on like man, like woman. They blamed him for all the problems that they had brought upon themselves. Their guilt spilled out in rage, and instead of remorse, they chose blame. So they killed like man, like woman. They mocked him They tortured him. They abused him. They scorned him. And they killed him. But death could not hold the one who created life. Great One startled woman and man by appearing to them after the sacrifice. He announced that he would turn their act of hatred and rejection into his way of forgiving them. Instead of punishing them, he would use his death to offer them forgiveness. The death of like man, like woman, would be substitution for the punishment that they deserved. If they would return to him and acknowledge Great One and leave the rebellion, he would forgive them. Although they deserved to die, he would take their punishment. And amazingly, he chose to use their act of ultimate rebellion to be his act of ultimate forgiveness. Some of man and woman's descendants returned to Great One, asking forgiveness for their part in the rebellion. To their astonishment, Great One explained that he not only forgave them, but he commissioned them to be storytellers, to join Great One in telling his story by telling their part in his story. This was the fulfillment of what Great One had begun in the very beginning. Man and woman would share in the intimacy and the purpose with Great One and would live their part in Great One's story. And so the story was told far and wide. Some sang the story, some wrote it in parables, and others lived it among those too poor to read it for themselves. And in telling the story, storytellers found satisfaction and great fulfillment. What they sought but never found in the rebellion, they enjoyed naturally in friendship with Great One as they lived their part in his story. They discovered that what had been lost in the rebellion, in those days of rebellion, was now restored fully and completely to them. There is a last episode in the story. That episode is still being written. Great One only smiles and nods his head when asked how the story ends. Though the rebellion continues, Great One has declared victory. And that brings us to your part in the story. You do have a part in God's story, you know. Each one of us does. And God's story